Already says you are
And
live on StreamYard.
okay, yes, I am just refreshing Twitch to see if we're live already. Yes,
Ah, that
we're live
takes
on
10
Twitch.
seconds or something like that. No,
Yeah,
I
perfect.
we're talking a little bit for those who are already here. We're talking a little bit, like 2 minutes before we start, so that we have something that fills the stream. And we're using StreamYard. You can really see it because we have the free version with the logo up here.
Hmm.
But yeah, we are already having 10 people here and two have comments already. Yay!
Oh, hello.
Hi Samuel. And hi Cici. Great. And another one. Hey yeah. Ken. I'm
Ken
really
Ken, hello.
struggling often with saying names out loud, so but now I have Shivi to help me with that.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Okay. Yeah. We can just kill time until we're at 2 minutes live. Um
Yeah.
Put in a few banners. Actually, fun fact: we're just two doors away from each other, but it's much easier to do it on StreamYard than actually meeting in an office.
Yeah, it's also what works if it works, it works. If it ain't
Yes,
broken, we don't fix it. Yeah.
that's true. Oh, see, Samuel, that's practical. Samuel prefers to stick with the real name so that we can actually pronounce it. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Yay! And it looks like we can start. So, welcome everyone to this kind of video podcast lecture slash whatever you make of it thingy. Uh, so this is actually part of the Game Studies and Engineering Master Program, and in short GSE at the University of Klagenfurt, which is located in the south of Austria. We're expecting a lot of rain today, which is something you'd never say in a recorded lecture because it depends on the context. It's not true in most cases. Anyway, I'm Matthias, and I'm giving the lecture, and I invited Shivi, who is an expert in many things, but today we need two of them, Unity and Unreal. So, Shivi, can you say a few words about yourself?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Matthias, for the introduction. Yeah, I was actually one of the first batches of GSE here, the Game Study Engineering program at the University of Klagenfurt. I graduated from GSE a few years ago, and now I work as a project assistant here at the university still in the Spirit project. I work with Unity a lot on augmented reality and virtual reality applications now. And I have a lot of hobby game developer experience due to my programming background in GSE and everything. So, and very, very happy to be here. Very looking forward to sharing some insight into Unity and Unreal with everyone.
Awesome. It's really a pleasure to have you, Shivi. He is working also on a project which is extremely impressive with HoloLens and Quest 3, so a lot of 3D knowledge there. We liked it a lot. Okay, so just a few administrative things in advance. So if you have not heard in Austria, it's Lange Nacht der Forschung, which is German for Long Night of Research, which is actually English for Lange Nacht der Forschung. I think the German one came first. And the idea is that in this long night of research, universities and higher educational institutes and independent research agencies present their research to the main public, so it's science to public, and you're definitely invited. It is at the university in Klagenfurt on May 24. There are games to play, there are people to talk to, and a lot of places to walk to and from. So join us for the Lange Nacht der Forschung. Yeah. Then, for those of you who participated in or still participate in advanced topics in game engineering, thank you very much for submitting to the PGDA Student Award. We'll keep the fingers crossed. Yeah, that's the term in English. We'll keep the fingers crossed. And yeah, we'll reflect on your submissions later on. I think what I've heard, Nobody actually wants to talk about the submissions right now. I want to get them off their head. Okay, and Shivi, are you ready for the main thing?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Let's go.
Then I'll switch the banner. Unity versus Unreal. Ready, set, fight. So the main idea was that Shivi has experience in both engines, Unity and Unreal Engine. And many people ask the same question, which one should I choose over the other? And then I typically say it depends on the task. And this is basically what covers my whole knowledge about the complete domain of when to choose Unity and Unreal. And if we want to go deeper, we need Shivi on the stream. So yeah, can you give us some introduction to what is actually Unity? How does one make games with Unity, to start with one of them?
Yeah, yes, of course. So Unity is a game engine. It can be used to make more than games, but we'll only focus on games for today. It's a game engine. It uses C# as its scripting language, and it can be used to make both 2D and 3D games, and for a lot of different platforms as well, as we'll get into it. And it's one of the most popular engines out there. Very popular with students. Very popular with indies. We can think of games like Hollow Knight, Pokemon Go, which was quite the phenomenon when it launched, Among Us, which might still be a phenomenon, and similar games that have been made with Unity. So it's a very powerful game engine. It has a bit of its drawbacks. We'll get into those later, but yeah. So that's Unity for us.
And what about Unreal?
Yeah. So Unreal is also a game engine. But Unreal specialty really lies in 3D. It is a 3D game engine. I would say it is more where Unity might be more indie oriented. Unreal is maybe more AA, AAA oriented. It uses C++ as its scripting language, but they also have a visual scripting language they call Blueprints in Unreal Engine, which is quite powerful. And there's also been a lot of Unreal Engine games recently that have gone viral. Fortnite is a very good example, made by the creators of Unreal Engine themselves, Epic Games. Fortnite is quite a big game. It's also often used as a medium to launch new Unreal Engine features, to show them off in Fortnite first, to get an idea of how the players perceive these things. And Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was made in Unreal Engine, which I believe maybe it wasn't exactly indie, but still I think it can be considered an indie game. But Stray, which was released, I believe, last year, very beautiful game, and this is actually one of the few examples of an indie game made with Unreal Engine recently. So Unreal Engine is a very powerful 3D game engine. Yeah.
Nice. I think if we Don't Not Entertainment, they did these games like Remember Me and the very popular series of I'm stuck with the name again. Maybe I'll find it out. But they are using Unreal Engine too. So this is also in between AAA and indie somewhere. Just to add up on what comes through. So, Shivi, what did you make? Which features did you use of those engines?
Yeah, so I started off with Unity in Unreal. When I was a student in GSE, most of the game jam games that I made were with Unity. So during those game jams, I've made 2D games, 2D platformers, 2D maybe 2D like shooters. I've made augmented reality games with Unity. I have even made like a mobile app with Unity, which is also an experience. Once I started working here in the Spirit project, I've made augmented reality apps with Unity for the HoloLens. I've made VR apps for the Quest devices. So that's where my experience with Unity lies. I would say more extensively in 2D, but I've also definitely delved into 3D with Unity. And I've also made games for the web platform, for PC Unity. Like when I was doing game jams, often I tried to change it up every time and try to aim for something new. So I do have quite a diverse experience with Unity. In Unreal Engine, however, it they can do 2D, but they really want you to do 3D. In Unreal Engine, I have made the very first game I made was like a first-person atmospheric horror game, 3D, of course, and this was um, this was a very good experience, like getting to learn all the mechanics of Unreal Engine. But this was a group project. So solo games that I've made with Unreal Engine since are like your typical first-person shooters, third-person shooters, like PvE kind of things. I've made like stealth games, trying to steal some things while trying to avoid enemy AI, and smaller things, but along that way.
Okay, blue screen says Kena Bridge of Spirits was made with Unreal. Yeah, did not know. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
At least I know how to spell the name. I even know the real name, but I won't say it on stream. Thank you for telling us. Yeah, I think I even played your horror game. Was it the one where you had a mirror inside?
Yes, yeah. The mirror was the final scene.
Yeah, that was really
And
cool because at this time it was not an RTX mirror, but it was dynamic camera texture or something like that. That
yes,
was
yeah. So, oh, you wouldn't believe. I think we spent 4 hours trying to get a mirror working.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
an intuitive thing in no 3D
No,
engine.
no. It was, yeah. Nowadays, maybe there's some advanced technology. You could probably like use AI to help generate a mirror image nowadays.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most likely, or just
yeah,
switch on RTX and say mirror
yeah.
with global illumination.
Mhm.
Okay, but yeah, just go. Let's go into comparison. Where does Unity excel? When should we use Unity compared to Unreal?
Yeah, so I've already hinted at it a little bit, but a big part of why I would say you should use Unity versus Unreal Engine is if you want to make a 2D game. Um, there's some other engines we can get into later, but if you want to make a 2D game, Unreal can, on paper, support 2D with their library or their framework called Paper 2D, but I would not recommend it. It is definitely it's not even. I would say maybe it's not even recommended by Epic Games themselves, because of how much they actually support it or document it, or how little they actually support and document it. They have been trying to get better at it. They have been trying to improve their 2D engine, maybe because they've just done enough with their 3D engine by now that they're looking at other things. But if you want to make a 2D game, stick with Unity. This is the way to go. Especially like even importing 2D assets in Unreal is such a big hassle. There is like 4 additional steps to do versus like importing them to Unity. Like you drag and drop it in the scene. It's there. In Unreal Engine, there's like 3 additional steps, and you can get used to it. But yeah, don't bother. Yeah. So that's a big thing. That a big plus for Unity, I'd say. And so this is 2D is maybe like a genre of a game, but also with platforms. If you want to aim for mobile platforms, or WebGL, or web browsers, Unity is definitely a better choice than Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine, Epic Games, they keep trying to push the state of the art in terms of like visual fidelity and visual quality, and what that ends up doing is just making the game unplayable on lower end devices. And a lot of mobile devices we have are restricted in their performance. A lot of browsers are restricted in their performance in general. um, they're just not even allowed to use like all the performance of the system, in most cases. So yeah, Unity is the way to go. Even your base Unreal project, if you were to just deploy a template like a first person shooter template, that's probably still gonna not be um, uh, like powerful. It's gonna be way too powerful to run smoothly. And you can, for mobile specifically, you can downsize, you can like downsample your textures, you can downgrade your games graphics, you can downgrade maybe some functionality. And there are some guides on it out there, but I would highly recommend to then just maybe stick with Unity, because so many things that Epic Games are doing with Unreal Engine 5 now are focused on visuals. And if you're just losing all of that anyways, then yeah, maybe we
Would
don't
you go
bother with
there?
it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. You
Um,
said may I
yeah.
just chip in here? You said you already did mobile apps with Unity. Would you also recommend Unity for creating mobile apps?
Yes and no. It I would say it really depends on how big your app idea is. A big reason why I did I've also made a mobile app with an Android app with the Android framework. And the big reason why I did an Android app with Unity was that I was already familiar with Unity and C Sharp, and I did not want to learn and go through documentation of everything. But what I very quickly learned is that in the end, Unity is a game engine, and they do have a lot of features. For example, accessing the camera. That's maybe the app I developed was a simple like home organization app where you can. I'm the forgetful kind of person, so I developed this for myself. Where if I store something in my storage, I take a picture of it and I label it, and I just have folders in the app and everything, and I just if I want to search for something, I just know where it is stored in my apartment. So that was the idea. But even getting the camera working in Unity was then a big hassle because this was 5 years ago. So maybe Unity has improved in that sense, but considering that games often don't use a camera, they don't need camera input, and Unity is a game engine. They didn't really have anything for that, and I had to find workarounds. I did get it working in the end, but um, after in my second app, when I did put in the effort to learn the Android framework, at that point I would recommend. Then I would definitely recommend learning the Android framework to make a proper Android app. I cannot comment on how the iOS framework is, but yeah, if you have something very basic and you already know Unity and you want to put maybe a bit of focus on the UI, because you can also do 2D UI fairly easily with Unity. Very intuitive. It's like a what you see is what you get kind of editor. Um, Maybe then you can go for it. But yeah, if you want to do anything
Otherwise,
advanced, even intermediate, I would say maybe yeah, then
go
Android
for
framework is
Kotlin
definitely
or
better.
Flutter or something like that.
Yes, yeah, something like that.
Okay, okay. But on the other hand, C Sharp, you mentioned it. Where does
Yeah.
Unity
So
excel? I'm just picking up the ball. C Sharp is next on the list.
yes, yeah, C# is next on it. Actually, one thing I wanted to mention for WebGL or deploying for the browsers, definitely use Unity because Unreal has officially dropped support for web browsers for in the past few years. So they don't even pretend anymore. They have actually, if you go to their documentation, they still tell you how you could build a game. But I believe since Unreal Engine 4.24 or 4.26, which is already quite a few years ago now, they just don't officially support deploying for the web anymore. So definitely, their Unity is the way to go. Um, yeah, but moving on to C Sharp. C Sharp is a scripting language. It's similar. It's object oriented, similar to maybe a little bit similar to Java or Python. But what it is that, in my opinion, it's easier to learn than C++. And in Unreal Engine, when you have to learn C++, um, you don't have to. You can make do with just blueprints, but if you want to go deep into Unreal Engine, C++, I know is a lot of people are hesitant to learn C++ because with C++, not you have to have two different files, like a header file and a CPP file, to one file only for declaration and the other for initialization, and one file only to declare signatures of your functions and the other to actually define the function. Pointers, which are very confusing in the beginning, and especially if you don't know how to program, I would say C Sharp is much easier to learn than C++. Much less intimidating as well because C Sharp code, I would say, reads more naturally. In C++ code, there's all these like the arrow, the double colons, this, that. There's so much in there that even to read 6 lines of code, you then have to Google 6 things to just understand what's happening. So it's not that intuitive for beginners, definitely. And nowadays, I believe a lot of people are getting into Python. I believe Python has become very, very popular, of course, and it's being taught in schools, and it's like the first programming language people pick up because it's so versatile. It's easy. There's a lot of advantages to Python, and if you do know Python, then I think you can transition to C sharp much more easily, because C sharp also has the option to, for example, not have data types like Python does, not declare data types like Python does, and a lot of things that you can get away with in Python, where you can um, pass multiple objects to return from a function, for example. You can also kind of do that in C sharp, and the libraries are available for C sharp are also like extensive. Like you can, for example, Unity doesn't have JSON support by default if you want to load JSON files, and you can just find a library for it in C sharp. And oh, I have tried to do that in C++ in Unreal Engine, and simple libraries such as exporting to JSON, which that is not that difficult in C++, but like maybe displaying a graph. If you want to just display a graph, oh, this is such a big hassle in Unreal Engine, and with C++ in general. So yeah, all the utility stuff is also much easier to do in C sharp. So it's definitely easier, and less of a barrier of entry than C++ is. So I think if one doesn't if you don't know how to program, then C sharp is much better to get into than C++. Yeah.
Just a quick question in between. Unity has announced at some point they wanted to integrate JavaScript. They have dropped the idea too. There's no mention of JavaScript currently.
Yeah, I think a long time ago Unity used to have Unity script.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted to transition it to JavaScript because JavaScript is just more popular, but I don't think they're gonna do it
Okay.
anymore. Yeah.
It's gone.
It's gone. It's gone. I think
Like
C
the
sharp
web
is fine
support
on
of
Unity.
Unreal, that's gone too.
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay.
Yeah, but more plus points in for Unity is that, yeah, Unity has a very good built-in collaboration tool. You can use Unity Teams, which I believe you even have to use to make a new Unity project sometimes. And if you have people in your team, which you can have up to 4 people in a free team, and you can collaborate, you can have version control and everything on the Unity servers, and it's inbuilt into the engine. Whereas with Unreal Engine, it's not that easy. The source control that is inbuilt into the engine, or the source control that's preferred by the engine, is Perforce, or something maybe even more complicated, that you have to set up your own dedicated server for, and you have to have server space to set that up, and so much hassle in deploying it and everything. And for us, when I worked on an Unreal Engine game with a few other people, it was so much of a hassle that we all literally worked on 4 different Unreal Engine projects. We did not collaborate at all. And in the final day of on the final day of the game jam, we just copied assets over to one project and all huddled around one laptop and then tried to make the project work. So that, um, of course, if there's a big company, they can support something like this, and they have someone dedicated to maintaining a server like this, and then it's possible. But for indies, for students, there's this big hassle there.
There is a great
Yeah.
question on the comments, but I would postpone it until we are up to Unreal, because I like that question. I already asked Shivi that in the morning.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, Ken. So thank you very much for the question.
Yes. Yeah, but we'll definitely come back to that. Yeah. But just a few more things now, maybe to talk about what Unity does better than Unreal is, yeah, I've been leaning into this, but I think Unity is definitely much better for solo use. Maybe also better for indie use. Indie teams of, yeah, maybe if you have an indie team of 10, 15, 20 people, you could still manage to learn Unreal Engine. But indie teams often come with this notion that people are not that, maybe it's a lot of like people fresh out of university. It's a lot of people who do not have a lot of experience in the industry, or maybe it's a lot of people who often have to do multiple things, because often in smaller teams there's not this idea that you have one dedicated programmer, like oftentimes the programmer might also have to do some visual stuff and things like that. And I think Unity is way more intuitive for that. It's easier to get into. The barrier to entry is again much lower. Unreal has systems for everything, which is a plus, which we can get into later. But with having systems for everything, it means that every time you want to do something, either you try to reinvent the wheel, which seems stupid when you think, I want to make a landscape here. Turns out Unreal already has a landscape generation tool. So I don't have to go through this hassle of like hand painting a landscape myself. I can just use this landscape generation tool. And then you go to the landscape generation tool, and turns out that you have to learn how the landscape generation tool works. And then so it's so much more learning, because yes, there's a lot of powerful tools in build, but um, they need to be studied, they need to be understood, and often it feels like maybe it's a waste of time to learn everything, because sure, one person can learn all of these things. I have certainly tried, but maybe it's better to then focus on a few aspects in Unreal Engine. So for indies, for solo projects, maybe Unreal Engine is it's not the best choice out there.
I think that also reflects the evolution of those tools, because Unity has always been this easy to approach tool by design, while Unreal is a professional tool coming from the professional game development scene. And I don't know, I'm old, I know, but I clearly remember those modding tools from 25 years ago. They are horrible. They would crash. They would not do anything if you click somewhere the wrong pixel or something like that. And Unreal kind of comes from this corner. So everything has this professional touch. You need to know which button to click, which button does not work, which button does what, although it says something different, and so on and so on. And Unity actually comes from this, okay, let's do something. It's an Apple device. And if you swipe somewhere, then something happens. And at the end of the day, nothing crashes. So while it still does, but it is based from this corner of the development community. So that's different, actually.
Definitely. It's so much more user friendly, Unity, I would say. Which for Unreal Engine, to me, it's a bit of a shame, because I do admire all the things they keep adding to Unreal Engine. Now they released Unreal Engine 5.4, which when 5.0 was released, I think back in 2020 or 2021, it was a huge deal with a lot of new features, but Epic Games, they're not the best with documentation. And even finding tutorials, which is actually my next point with Unity, even finding tutorials for Unreal Engine ends up being hard, because there's simply not that many people out there who, one, have the knowledge, and two, actually want to make tutorials on this. Because I will shout out some people at the end of this video podcast, but except those few, I haven't found any creators that are covering all aspects of Unreal Engine, or like niche aspects of Unreal Engine. There's all these creators that you will always find. If you go how to make a game in Unreal Engine, you will always find a video that is like, make an Unreal Engine game in 3 hours. And everyone is covering this. But if you then want to do the advanced systems, which Unreal Engine has so many of, and even, I don't know, try to utilize the material graph, which has like 100 plus nodes, and I don't know, but maybe 80 of them do. And like, there's no one covering those things. And it's a lot of maybe trial and error, a lot of wasted time, a lot of frustration sometimes that comes along with it. And also often in these guides, for Unreal Engine specifically, I have noticed what ends up happening with people is these guides are made to be followed in like this exact order. And if you deviate from it a little bit, you ask, I don't know, you try to think of, or in the documentation or in a blog post, you try to think of, okay, so this asset was made this way. What if I want to maybe use 2 assets here, or maybe I want to use 3 assets here? Turns out people just don't know how to do that. No one has the answer. And oftentimes the answer is you go dive into the source code and you try to figure it out yourself, which which with Unity, since we're talking about Unity's positives, Unity, there's so many tutorials out there. There's big YouTubers, Brackeys being one of the biggest, probably Blackthorn Prod, and so many YouTubers and artists even that use Unity because it's just easy to get into. They've gotten into it and they've gotten very proficient at it, and they're able to do these sort of advanced tutorials. Maybe it is to say that the advanced of Unity is not as advanced as the advanced of Unreal. But still they're able to, I feel like they're able to use the engine much more effectively to a much larger extent than than people are with Unreal Engine. And so that's another big plus for Unity, where you have a lot of tutorials, a lot of them are beginner friendly, and even if you want to delve into advanced topics, you'll find a lot of documentation out there in blogs and such, and a lot of very, very good quality YouTube tutorials. Yeah.
I can top this up with an anecdote, because when GDC Europe was still a thing, I was there, and it took place just before the Gamescom. I think it was the first or the second time that it happened in Cologne. Before that, it happened in Leipzig, I think. Nobody remembers that. That's how deep my knowledge goes back. And then I don't know if you know the setup. It was like this conference would have an overlap with the Gamescom, and then one day would be conference plus Gamescom, and then you would have the same entries, and the Gamescom entries are basically queued up with people, so you don't get in there. There were dedicated entries for the GDC. So you could get to the conference, but you have to know where. And then I approached the conference, and there was this huge crowd. They would stand there, look at it, look at my pass. Oh, it's a conference pass, let's go there. And then somebody approached me and said, do you know where to get in? I said, yeah, just follow me. Then we started talking, and then it turned out it was an executive of Unity. And I said, yeah, I've seen you're well off. Everybody talks about you. He said, yeah, that is our business model. It's basically bring out the documentation, let people use it, make the barrier really small for people to jump into game development, because that's what nobody does. You have great engines, but there's no documentation. So that's their business model from the beginning on, actually.
Yeah, it seems to have been working really, really well so far. Except maybe that one mess up they did with the licensing, which no one liked. But other than that, Unity got a lot of positive press. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, especially among students, even after this licensing fiasco, I feel like so many people have just still stuck with Unity. And maybe with Unity 6, as you mentioned earlier today, Unity 6, they might be launching the license to pay per install. Maybe that does become a thing, but I think there would still be people who still stick with Unity just because of how easy it is to get into.
I think, maybe the audience can help us out here, but I think the license change is that you have to pay a runtime fee if you have more than 500,000 installations or something like that. Not depending on the price of the game. So even if you have a free game, that was the whole hassle about, you would have to pay for installation of your players. So if you make an indie game and this is really popular and you don't make any money out of it, you still have to pay. Let's see how they execute that, but other than that, it's quite similar to all licensing models. If you're really successful, they want to pay. They want you to pay.
Yeah, I think there's no issue with if the game is really successful to pay. I think a big issue, a big thing with that was they were planning to charge people retroactively.
Yes.
So there were people with a free game that's maybe even a paid game that's gotten millions of installs, and they would suddenly have to shell out. I think there was this one person on Twitter that said that they would owe Unity about $4 million based on this thing. So if the licensing were to go into effect retroactively, which is just absurd.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah, but what about Unreal? Where does Unreal excel?
Yeah, actually, so where does Unreal excel? Actually, before we get into where does Unreal excel, there's a final thing I want to talk about Unity, which has been very relevant to me as I've been talking about. I've been preaching Unreal Engine more and more recently to my colleagues here, to my friends in general, and a big issue that a lot of them say that they encounter is that Unreal Engine doesn't run smoothly on their laptops. It even developing while during developing and the builds and moving things around and everything. Um, Unity also excels there. Simple, like that's really their formula. They're simple and they will run on even like a typical student laptop, which I imagine is maybe not that high end. In fact, I had a PC from 2020 that I built in 2020, and it was all latest gen hardware for 2020. So 4 years old PC that I pretty much had to refresh fully this year to get the latest Unreal Engine working smoothly. Otherwise, I would get something like 11 FPS in the editor, which is absurd. That's also really not beginner friendly or budget friendly, even so to say. So Unity is really doing good in that regard as well. But yeah, since we're talking about how computationally expensive Unreal Engine is, let's talk about where they excel. And speaking of the computationally expensive things, one of the biggest features of Unreal Engine that lends to all of this computation is the graphics. So especially with Unreal Engine 5, they launched these two headliners called Nanite and Lumen, and they launched with Unreal Engine 5 preview, and as soon as the preview launched, they were constantly making headlines because this is just unlike anything that's been done before. Um, in a game engine, Nanite pretty much allows you to have millions of particles or millions of triangles in a mesh in a scene without losing performance. It scales incredibly well. And with their inbuilt Quixel bridge, there's this company called Quixel that Epic Games has paired up with, and they have a plugin for Unreal Engine called Quixel Bridge. What Quixel does is they scan really high quality assets, the real assets like in our real world, and they make lifelike quality scans of them. One of the best examples I want to give is that all the fjords in Norway, I believe they're called, they have rocks scanned from these fjords, and I have tried to tell the difference between an image of a scene and an actual image of the area itself, and it's hard to tell the difference because these are just that high quality. And they also have assets scanned for medieval environments, futuristic, and all that. And a lot of these assets, the newer ones, are available in nanite quality, as Unreal likes to call them, which basically means that you can scale them up. You can have millions of them in your scene, and you will just not lose performance. Your game will run still like smoothly as far as Unreal Engine games go. But your game will
May I just chip in with a question? As far as I understood it, it was that you can also use these assets in kind of a procedural content generation way, where you mix and match them and then just paint something and then you will make up everything.
Yes, that's actually one of Unreal Engine systems. As I also mentioned, that Unreal Engine has these systems. They have a procedural content generation system, both for normal content and also for foliage specifically. But for this normal content, what they have is you can define maybe like you can predefine maybe modular houses, for example, if you want to generate town or anything, and you just draw a line or draw a curve or draw whatever in your scene, and they will just be procedure generated. And yes, these assets can be used for that. And the epic thing, no pun intended, is is that these are all free to use. As long as you're using Unreal Engine, all the Quixel assets are free to use, which is just amazing. Really high quality assets and with no performance loss most of the times. Yeah, if you're using nanite quality assets, which unfortunately not a lot of them are available in nanite quality now. But if you are using nanite quality assets, it's just something else. It's just this thing that where you see so many grass particles like floating or like huge like rocks with like such high quality textures, and the performance, there's no performance loss. So that's, I think, is a very big thing with Unreal Engine. But um, the other thing that I think 3D game engines often struggle with in terms of visuals is lighting. And Unreal Engine introduced this thing called Lumen, which can be easily summarized as real time dynamic lighting. So it is lighting that uh, is real time, so and dynamic. So when it's changed, it doesn't need to be baked. It doesn't, like, all the normals of the light, all the everything, all the calculations do not need to be done again before showing the effect. So it's just like you can have lighting done quickly, you can have lighting done dynamically. It's, of course, it's very good in general because
Now, also on an unlimited scale, but I understand it's like global
yeah,
illumination, not only
yes,
say a handful of dynamic light sources, but on a global scale that includes ambient occlusion and everything.
yes, yeah. So that's, I think that's like these two systems with Unreal Engine 5, they made very big headlines, and with Unreal Engine always pushing the visual quality that game engines can produce, that's, I think, is a very big plus in favor of Unreal Engine. Another thing I really quickly want to add here is that with pushing these video qualities, Unreal Engine, like, not only they're not only marketing themselves as a game engine now, they're even marketing themselves as a movie production, like production engine, for CGI, for I'm sure I'm not sure if you've seen this demo, The Matrix Reawakens.
No,
So they tried to recreate the city that's in the Matrix. They tried to recreate it in Unreal Engine, and they recreated it in super high quality. And you are Neo. You can just fly around the city. It's very, very high quality. There's traffic. They're making use of nanite and lumen, and this they used as a yeah, as a basis to like show off their production features, like how they could just be used to create a movie. I believe they also created a short movie or many short movies, but I cannot remember any of them right now. But Unreal Engine also has been pitching themselves as a production tool. And maybe in the other another use case is architecture visualization. They've also been pushing everything to do with architecture visualization, which is just 3D modeling and the lighting. So they're also trying to market themselves as a tool for architects, which I think is also something to note here. But yeah, we'll come back to games because that's what we're here for. But in case any of you are interested in being an architect or
I
making a
think
movie,
also then the license options are different as far as I know.
yes, the
I
license
think
option
the
are different.
free license for Unreal only applies to the game developer part and to small
Yes.
businesses and something like that. But if you have an architectural something, then you have to pay, I think, the per seat license. As far as I
Yes, I think
understand.
that's, yeah, I think they're really aiming it towards just full blown industry professionals that
Yeah.
that can probably afford these licenses, or for larger teams, larger production studios. But then I touched on Quixel earlier. What I would like to touch on, would like to segue from that is into the Unreal Engine marketplace. So I know Unity also has an asset store. Asset store is quite infamous. All people are always referring to the Unity asset store, and it has a lot of assets on it. But what the Unreal Engine marketplace has is a lot of free assets that I've noticed that often I find the quality of free assets on the Unity asset store is maybe not that great. Um, there's a lot of assets that are not that high price. Maybe for 20 to 40 euros, you can still get a lot of useful items. But what Epic Games has done is they had this project called Paragon, and also this mobile game called Infinity Blade. And what they did is they scrapped, like, the Paragon was like a full blown, I think, maybe MOBA, maybe like this Dota 2 or League of Legends, or maybe it was like a third person RPG. I'm not exactly sure.
No, I think it was a
But
Dota competitor.
yeah,
And they scrapped it for Fortnite, as far as I remember, because
yes,
Fortnite had a mode, player versus evil, and then they implemented based on the other game the military battle royale game. What was the name? I always forget.
Player Unknown Battlegrounds.
Yeah, PUBG. They remade PUBG in Fortnite, and then this was something like more successful, and they scrapped everything else.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
fine.
So what they did with all the Paragon assets is they made all the assets that they were going to use in the game available for free. So you have very good quality animated rigged meshes for the player characters. You have meshes and animated and rigged for the enemies. You have particle effects. You have levels, and you just these are all available free. And I feel like that's a very good way to start. You have to, of course, go with the aesthetic, which is this typical high fantasy. But I feel like high fantasy is also maybe often the choice of a setting for a lot of games in the first place. So uh, they are, I think that's a very good plus to have. Um, and as we have here from CC, they mentioned that that we can get 5 Unreal assets that you would usually have to pay for free every month. Yes, that's also really good. I always, even if I do not know that I will use this asset, I always just buy them to just to just collect them. My Unreal Engine vault is just so big by now. Um,
Reloot.
yeah, exactly. So I think the Epic Marketplace is quite useful. I think you can make pretty much like a whole RPG. You could probably clone Skyrim without needing to use any paid assets at all. Um, yeah, and of course it would be a lot of effort to clone a game like Skyrim. But what I mean to say is all the environment assets, all the NPCs, all the houses, all the enemies, and everything you could probably get, maybe not exactly what's happening in Skyrim, but you could probably get something similar for free on the Epic Games Marketplace, or just looking around the internet as well. Um, but I feel like that's a very big plus. Yeah, also the 5 free assets, they're also very, very good. Um, yeah. The next thing about Unreal Engine, I've touched a little bit on these inbuilt systems. That I keep mentioning. What I mean by that is that the Unreal Engine has these systems inbuilt which just let you do very specific things. We talked a little bit about procedural generation, procedural foliage generation, or procedural mesh generation, or anything like that. This is an inbuilt system. You can It's very modular. Usually they're very modular. You can go and you can tweak them. You can change how much you want the rotation, the this, that, whether you want it to be aligned with the landscape, or you always want it to be facing up, all of that. The downside, as I mentioned when we were talking about plus of Unity, is that you have to learn these systems. But there is also this upside that once you've learned the systems, that you can then simply, like, you now have access to these very, very powerful um, frameworks that you can then use to cut down on a lot of development time, because a lot of things have already been done for you. So same with maybe their animator, like everything to do with meshes, which is like skeletons, mesh, animation, collision. All of that is, I feel like, a little bit hard to get into when you have to, in Unreal they call these things blend spaces, where you have to figure out like state machines for animation, and like blending animations and all that. But once you've learned it, then you can have very smooth transitions between a standing and a running character, and like pretty much anything. Like if you're running, if you want to shoot while running, and you want to just have the upper body react and the bottom half of the body stay the same, things like that become very easy. There is not much to do, not much to figure out there. And yeah, Unity also has something similar. So maybe this wasn't like the best example, but there's a lot of systems in Unreal Engine that the particle system also, for example, Niagara they call it, their particle system. Unity's particle system is also very good, I'd say. But then so is Unreal Engine's, and as with most things, the UI is very unintuitive in the beginning, and it takes a long while of getting used to. But once you're used to it, it's very powerful. Um, so all of these inbuilt system, I would say, are also a plus to Unreal Engine as long as you put in the time to learn them. Yeah. Um, the other thing is, as I mentioned in the beginning of Unity, talking about Unity, that if you're working with 2D, stick to Unity. And I would like to say, if you're working with 3D, try Unreal. I would not say use Unreal because Unity can still do 3D games and there's still a lower barrier to entry. But with Unreal Engine, they really excel in 3D games. I would not even try to use it for a 2D game, but for 3D, I would definitely try. Especially if you look at their templates, which now Unity also has pretty good templates. Uh, but with Unreal's templates for third person, first person, or maybe like a vehicle based game or anything, these are very good points to like jump into uh, and start with. Like you have a lot of things, like at least the player character and player controller are already implemented. So all of this I think can be quite beneficial when making a 3D game. And if you want to make a 3D game, maybe start off small, maybe start off with a very basic, you have enemies running at you, try to shoot them. So this I think is a very basic game in Unreal Engine. Oftentimes you will see most of the YouTube tutorials also try to teach you something like this in the beginning, um, or something to do with like maybe an escape kind of game where there's no enemy but rather puzzles or traps. Something like that can also be made. Um, but if you're doing 3D, I would definitely recommend to use try Unreal Engine at least, and maybe once you're familiar with the gameplay, you can move on to uh, customizing the visuals, or other way around. Maybe you just keep the gameplay as it is in the basic template, and you only try to customize the visuals. Um, but yeah, for 3D, I would consider Unreal. Yeah, but only for 3D. Um, Another thing I want to mention actually, I'm remembering this is not in our notes. I'm just remembering things as I talk about Unreal Engine. Is that they have with Unreal Engine 5, they have this a few sample projects they call it. One of them is the Lyra starter project, they say. Another is Crop Out, which is like this strategy top down like resource management kind of game. Um, and then they have another Stacko bot, I think, which is like where you're this bot where you go around, you try to stack things on top of each other, and it's like maybe you're working in a factory kind of setting. But with Lyra starter game, this is available for free for Unreal Engine, of course, and they whenever a new feature is implemented and it's relevant to like gaming, because Unreal Engine is also working on a lot of like non-gaming features, they always try to showcase it in the Lyra starter project. So what you have in this Lyra starter project is a collection of functionalities that implemented for this. Oh, I should explain what the starter project is. It's a third person game where you can have maybe this capture the flag mode, where you're playing against AI, or maybe like a shooting mode, or you can just like run around a level. But what you have in that project is you get to see how a AAA studio develops a game like this, and it's all there, all the source code, everything is there for you to explore. So it's a very good insight into how, if you want to implement something and you play the Lara starter project and you find that it's been implemented there, then you can try to look at it and get inspiration from there, which is, I think it's very useful considering that there's not a lot of like good documentation surrounding Unreal Engine most of the times. So that's a very useful thing. And the other useful thing is with their inbuilt systems and free assets, they have this thing called content examples, where they just have examples for, I mean, I would like to say about just about anything you can do with the engine. Like, for example, for audio, I was playing around with it recently. There's like 12 examples of different kinds of audio you can produce, or different ways you can produce audio in, or different use cases for the audio, or maybe even more than 12. And so this is just really, if you also then want to figure out, you want audio that's behaving a certain way, you try to find it in the content examples, and then you can either just copy it into the project or try to see how it's implemented and go from there. So that's, I feel like, is also a very big plus of Unreal Engine, that they have this like library. It's kind of a lot of like go do your own exploration kind of thing, rather than here we will teach you how to do this. It's not like that, but at least there's all these examples there. Yeah. But yeah, maybe now we can move on to the question of the hour, which is blueprints and C++. Yeah. So
So
what
it
is?
is it possible to utilize the blueprint system for a complete game in Unreal, or do we have to learn C++? I think a short explanation for those who are new to the blueprint system. Blueprint is a visual programming language inside Unreal Engine, and C++ is the underlying programming language. But I think I'll head over to Shivi for more details, because I already learned in the morning that it's not C++ in Unreal, or it's just not pure C++.
Yes. So let's talk about, okay, let's start off with Unreal C++, because I feel like that's probably maybe even a bigger barrier to entry than everything else that is to do with Unreal. Unreal uses C++ as their scripting language, but the C++ that's utilized is not traditional C++ that you would find like, I don't know, applications. It is Unreal C++, as I like to say it. And Unreal has this like U-object framework, they call it, in which everything that would be present in a scene, that would be pretty much like present in the game, is derived from a U-object. So it is a U-object. And the benefit of having everything be a U-object is that automatically Unreal's framework garbage collects the U-objects, replicates them if you are doing multiplayer. They also take care of memory allocation and make sure that like the lifetimes of those objects are not set to be something that is like way too much or way too small. They automatically understand the scope of the objects, and all of these things that you might have to do with C++, where maybe if you try to learn it traditionally, you see that I have to always allocate memory for an integer. All of these bits and bytes I have to deal with. That's not the case in Unreal Engine. So if you destroy an object, the Unreal's garbage collector will collect it automatically. After a while, they even by default they have, this is not present in the scene, like visually you cannot edit it, but by default they even have a kill floor. So if something falls below a certain point, I think it's like if it falls maybe like 40 kilometers below the level, then it will automatically be garbage collected. So Unreal will assume that it's not being used anymore. So things like that. Also with particle effects, with anything that you might see in the scene. So things like that. So that's Unreal C++ framework. But then what blueprints are a wrapper around this C++ framework. So as Matthias mentioned, Blueprint is a visual programming language, or a visual scripting language, and what they do is it's essentially writing code, but without writing code. Instead of typing out a function, you like function's definition in code, you would rather search for the function's name and you click on the blueprint box for it, and you have it in the scene, and then you connect everything visually with all these wires, so to say, and that's how you code using blueprints. So when I say blueprints are a wrapper around C++, what I mean is every single blueprint in Unreal Engine is written in C++. Unreal Engine is open source, so you can, if you ever open blueprints, you can often just try to go and find which class it's based on. So there is C++ code underneath. It's just that there's a visual way to interact with it. And then to answer your question, yes, it is perfectly possible to utilize only blueprints to make a game in Unreal Engine. You'll find a lot of tutorials often actually covering that because of the barrier to entry that I keep mentioning. And in fact, one of my favorite Unreal Engine YouTubers, what he does is he only covers blueprints. He is I would say, a fairly successful indie developer. He's about to release his first big game, and it's all blueprints. So he doesn't code. He has a lot of industry experience in Unreal Engine. He is often also contracted to be consultant on AAA Studios games, but he does not know, program in C++ at all. This is not to say he might not know how to program, but there's no programming needed. You can make a whole game in Unreal Engine using just blueprints. Um, in fact, it's like that apparent that when you do start with a template in Unreal Engine asks you, do you plan to use C++ at all or no? Because if you don't plan to use C++ at all, then Unreal Engine will simply just give you, not even like give you the option to add C++ classes. They will just give you everything in blueprints, all the functionality is there. Um, the underlying code is still C++, yes, but it is very much possible to make a whole game in blueprints. And but then if you ask why use C++ in the first place, that's a very that's a question that I also had actually. I was like, why should I just use C++ in the first place, except maybe just wanting to program, which seems kind of masochistic. But I the reason you use C++ in Unreal Engine is to give you a lot more control. Control over anything and everything that you might want control over. There's nothing C++ in Unreal Engine will restrict you to do. You can have a lot of performance optimizations that you simply cannot do in blueprints that you can do in C++, which I think for smaller games it's not that relevant. But as you maybe if you transition into a double A, triple A, maybe if you're an indie studio that's making a bigger game, then all the small things can add up. All the 0.1 second late executions, they'll slowly add up, and eventually you would want to performance optimize your game. And then C++ will really come into effect, because whenever you call something from Blueprint, in the background it is calling the C++ function. So it's better if you just do it in C++, better for performance. And the other thing is that often in Unreal Engine, if you are using C++, it will not be only C++. You will end up using blueprints anyways. So the way Unreal Engine is intended to work, dare I say, is with C++ is that you write a C++ class, for example, for your character, and then you make a blueprint from that C++ class, and the blueprint is what you use in the scene. You never use the C++ class directly in the scene. So this is the way it's intended to be used. Or I'm saying intended, that's a very strong word, but this is the way kind of their workflow has been maybe solidified for now. So it's not that you can definitely avoid using C++ at all costs, but it's also not that if you're using C++, you'll just not use blueprints. In my games, I've often done the more advanced stuff in C++. And then, for example, I wanted to have an exploding barrel. And with C++ in Unreal Engine, a disadvantage is that every time you have to close the project and rebuild C++, it takes a long time. And I wanted to play around with the explosion effects and all of this of the barrel. So I just decided to ignore C++, just made the whole thing in blueprints. That's it. And it was super easy. I just switched to the tabs. I immediately can see my changes. It's super fast. I think for visual stuff or like a treasure chest that's opening, for example, blueprints are perfectly fine to use in that regard. What you can also do is make a parent class of C++, and yeah, not to get too technical, but all of this, pretty much the answer is you will end up using both blueprints and C++. Yeah.
Positive feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the feedback. But while I'm talking about C++, then I will just mention that the other maybe now a downside of C++ is that to make it work in Unreal Engine, you often need either you need ReSharper, the IDE from IntelliJ, or the extension into Visual Studio, or you need some other Visual Studio extensions. For students, these are free, but if you are not a student anymore, these are paid. And this can be a lot of money to shell out just to be able to use C++, because by default the support for C++ is not that great in Unreal Engine. Yeah. And maybe the last thing then I wanted to talk about for a plus of Unreal Engine is that I think it's great to work in teams. I think it's great if you can have one person learning one type of having one role of like maybe designing the landscape, designing the level, blocking out the level, or only dealing with character meshes and everything, and one person dealing with gameplay and one person dealing with something else. And if you have something like that, if you have enough people interested in learning Unreal Engine, I think then it can be a very, very good experience. Because if everyone is using this time to utilize like a subsystem of Unreal Engine to its fullest, then uh, there's pretty much no stopping you. You can end up creating a much much better game than I believe you would be able to do with Unity if um, all of you are able to combine your efforts in this regard. Yeah, yeah. So I believe that's pretty much concluding all the plus points I would say that Unreal Engine has. I think I got a bit too technical there in the middle. But
Wait,
yeah,
I'll
I think
try
it
to
really.
summarize.
Mhm. Yes,
Maybe I
yeah.
can try to summarize and you tell me if I'm wrong. So I think the Unity pros are that it is much better for 2D. Uh, that if you want to develop for mobile and web, Unreal is not an option, or not a very good one at least.
Mm.
C Sharp is easier to learn and to cope with because it's more similar to Python and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's good for solo and indie use. It has a lot of tutorials. The collaboration tool, the inbuilt collaboration tool is good, you say.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And where does Unreal excel? It's if you go for high quality graphics and high quality assets, then use that one with the global illumination, Lumen, and Nanite, the high quality things. Then the marketplace has a lot of very well done, highly high quality free assets. The inbuilt systems cover most of the tasks if you can manage them. There's even a
Mhm.
machine learning one you told me. So
Yes. Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff. The blueprints are really powerful, and you don't need to program C++ if you don't want to. And if you want to, there is a garbage collection, replication, everything given, and you can have a little bit of more fine control over the stuff than with C
Mm.
Sharp. And it's great to work in teams if you can split the tasks.
Yeah. I think that's a great summary. That pretty much sums up
Thank you.
the big Unity versus Unreal debate then.
See, I learned something. I
Um,
can summarize.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm nearly a generative AI.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, if there are more questions, please do not hesitate to post them. Otherwise, or actually, Shivi proposed that he'll mention a few useful resources for either engine. I could hand over to you
Yeah.
again, Shivi.
Yes. Yeah. This one is going to be quite short. The official documentation. It's always been horrible for Unreal Engine, but it has been improving, and I believe for Unity, it's also pretty decent by now. So the official documentation, especially for the latest features from Unreal Engine 5.0 onwards, I think that's a good resource. YouTube is a good resource for Unity. There's like Brackeys. They have a lot of, they haven't been in the game for a while now, but all of their older Unity tutorials I think are still very relevant. CodeMonkey is also a very big YouTuber um, in Unity space. For Unreal Engine, I would like to recommend Tom Lumen if you want to focus on C++ and maybe intermediate to advanced Unreal topics. I can recommend Ryan Laley. He's this YouTuber I mentioned that only works in blueprints, and he has a video on everything. So anything you could think of, you search his name will probably come up if you're talking about Unreal Engine. And also, I want to mention this that the official Unreal Engine channel is also quite good because they often host guest talks. So just from indie developers or teachers or anyone who's been using Unreal Engine, they have very long form videos on there, like 2 3 hour long discussions and talks about um, yeah about Unreal Engine. So for YouTube, those resources are very good. um, if you want to learn these and you think a course would help maybe more than a YouTube video, and you want to try to pay for a course, Udemy has courses from these people who call themselves now gamedev.tv. This is actually how I learned both Unity and Unreal Engine. So personally, I can recommend their courses quite a lot. I also learned Blender from them. So gamedev.tv, they have courses on pretty much everything to do with game development nowadays. I think they even have done a Godot course by now. So and Udemy often, one insider tip if I can give you is courses on Udemy are usually around 200 euros, but if you wait, they often go on sale for 15 euros, 15 or 20 euros, sometimes even 10. So if you just wait, you be patient, keep checking. I think you can grab these courses for fairly cheap, and these are very high quality courses. Yeah, I think like 40 plus hours of teaching, and I believe they also focus on teaching you programming in both of the Unity and Unreal Engine courses. So if you don't know C++ or C Sharp, they also focus on that. So
Yeah, you can also
highly
check
recommend.
Humble Bundle. Game Dev TV courses are often Humble Bundle. I mean, currently off topic, Godot 4 courses from Game Dev TV are there as a bundle.
Yeah, but this is I think these people definitely I can give them the seal of approval. That's how I learned. So
Great.
other than that, there's blogs. Tom Lumen, who I mentioned before, his blog is very good for advanced topics in Unreal Engine. And Knights of Unity, their blog is I find that to be that they're also covering some very interesting topics with Unity. Um, and finally, Discord, Unreal Source, which was previously called Unreal Slackers. It's one of the biggest communities of Unreal Engine users. And Bracky's Discord for Unity, I believe, is also a very, very, very big one. And if you want maybe more hands-on help, maybe more personal help with some of your issues, or you just want to see what others are up to and things like that, I can recommend either of these Discords for these engines. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just to top up on Unity versus Unreal, any recommendations when not to choose Unity or Unreal? Neither of them.
Yes. Um, so the Godot engine. It's they've been making quite a name for themselves recently. Maybe they've been pitching themselves as like a Unity alternative. What we discussed earlier, I would say Godot is maybe good for if you want to make games for the web, right? If you want to make games for the web, Godot seems to be a very good choice. Maybe the hierarchy now goes like Godot, then Unity, then Unreal Engine. Both Godot, like Brotato, Dome Keeper, two examples of games made with Godot. Very good games, very amazing games. So definitely, it's a very powerful engine. If you want to learn Godot, yeah, definitely, you can do a lot with Godot.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, I want to chip in. I'm always a big fan of Godot, but there is definitely gap between Godot and Unity. For instance, the asset store, the plugins, stuff like that is really hard to find on Godot. It's more like an open source community. Brekis recently started doing videos on Godot, so the documentation is getting better. It's not as good as Unity, but it's getting better. And they have their own programming language, GDScript, which is a little bit like Python, but not completely. So
Yeah.
it's kind of weird. Anyway.
Yeah, I've looked into GDScript. I think that's a big reason why I didn't go further with Godot. That I kind of stopped myself. I was like, no. I know we can also use C Sharp with Godot, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So that's there. But then other engines, which I would say are very specific in what they do, is RPG Maker. If you've ever played an RPG Maker game, RPG Maker doesn't require you to do any programming. Essentially, it's all visual, or like all drag and drop. What you see is what you get, kind of editors. And if you want to make an RPG Maker game, because it is a very specific engine, I do have to emphasize that. But if you do want to make a game that does fit the use case of RPG Maker, then there is no point in reinventing the wheel. I think you'll be more than satisfied with RPG Maker as a program. Yeah. And speaking of, then it's very specific game engines, RenPy. If you want to make visual novels, RenPy or maybe even Twine if you want to make narrative. But if you want to make visual novels, I almost fell into the trap where I was like, you know what? I can program a visual novel framework in Unity. And then like 3 hours in, I was like, it's no point in reinventing the wheel. If you want to make a visual novel, you go with RenPy. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, RenPy and RPG Maker both have a great web export.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Especially if we focus on indies, having your game on itch.io and not having it be a PC download, because people are often going to hesitate from running random zip files on their PC. Just having it be on itch.io and just playing it on the web, that's a great way to get people to play your game.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Pygame is another game engine, but it's based on Python. It is Python, and it's just another game engine. If you're familiar with Python and you're just set on using Python, yeah, you can use Pygame. But
there is also this niche product of Adafruit Pygamer, where you can actually program a game for a very small console, which you can buy for something like $50 or something like that. So that's,
yeah.
If you're into that niche, then Pygame might be the thing you're going for.
Yeah, Pygame. And then I wanted to say maybe these aren't really game engines, maybe even very, very basic frameworks like Scratch or Bitsy or Pico 8. Matthias, you mentioned this newer version of Pico 8.
Yeah, it's an open source version, TIC80. So Pico 8 is a virtual fantasy console, and TIC80 is an open source version from it. You can basically have everything within the virtual console. It's barely readable because of the pixelated fonts.
Yeah.
But you can do whole games on a virtual fantasy console. It's huge fun. I can also recommend there will be a course on retro gaming next year by Wilfried Ermenreich. So if you're wondering why would you program virtual fantasy consoles, I think this will be part of the course together with C64 programming. Commodore 64.
Yeah. So these are also, I think, in what they're doing there, I think they're doing very well in their niche.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, and actually, like RenPy, Pygame, RPG Maker, they are basically helping out those people who don't want to move away from what they already know, like the concept of a visual novel or programming Python, or having something in a retro environment where I don't have to think about it. And also, those things run on dedicated devices, so you can buy these emulator capable devices on was it Banggood and stuff like that, and then you can run the games on it. It looks nice, but of course limited. Yeah. Shouting out for a new course. I already said retro games, but there is another course. Shivi, do you want to introduce it?
Yes. So for the first time, I'll be teaching a course for a free elective for GSEs and anyone else who wants to join, called Self-Guided Game Studies in Engineering. It'll be a study course, a reading course, more details to come as the semester approaches, but it'll be in both the winter semester and the summer semester coming up. And I will focus on game development. I will focus on also game studies to an extent, but it'll be a lot of creative freedom, and a lot to do with just learning how to make games here at GSE. So we can touch on Unity, we can touch on Unreal, we can touch on the other engines as well. So if you're interested and want to know more, keep an eye out when you're registering for courses next semester.
And
for self-guided game studies engineering.
Who is the target audience? Do you need to know programming, or would you start at the beginning?
No, you do not need to know programming. So this is a big thing that I wanted to focus on. You do not need to know how to program. Come along. You will be more than welcome. And we will discuss everything.
Yeah, if you're wondering what we're talking about, if you're interested in our program, it's called Game Studies in Engineering, and you can check it out on http://www.au.at. Oh, I was stuck here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should close the content block and move over to the feedback block. If you don't have anything to add, Shivi,
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
that's it. Okay. Then if you have feedback for us, you can contact us on gse@aau.at, drop us a mail, or contact us on Discord if you're in the GSE server, or of course on Twitch. And if you're interested in the Game Studies and Engineering program, please check out our webpage. The application phase for this year is already over. But of course, if you're in the vicinity and studying anyway, we're happy to host you on our courses, Shivi's course, Wilfried's course. I'm teaching game engineering and stuff like that. So we would be happy to have you. Just drop by, and yeah, you can let us know if you want more or less, or if you don't like us. It's also okay. I can cope with that. I'm happy as a puppy as it is. And yeah, basically that's it. So thank you for joining in. There have been nearly 20 people around most of the time, so that's pretty cool. Thank you for being with us. I hope you had some fun with the stream, and I hope you still have a great time developing games regardless of the engine of your choice. Sorry, Shiva, I just took over your sentence. It was so great.
Perfect.
But do you have any final words?
Yeah. I hope you have a fun time developing games, regardless of the engine of your choice. Yeah. In the end, it is just about making what you want to make, and the engine is just a tool, and tools are interchangeable. So, yeah.
That is a good
Whatever you
bottom
figure
line,
out.
yes.
Yeah.
Great. Then thank you, Shivi, for being with us. Thank you to the audience. There are 2 more comments I have to check. Oh, I was at the ticker page. Is it free elective? Yes, I think it's a free elective as far as I know.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ken, thanks. Basically you, because I'm not that informative, so it must be for you, Shivi. It was very fruitful. Thank you for the praise. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sticking around the whole time, to all the people who were here.
Thanks. Okay, then. Let's wave to the audience and say goodbye.
Yeah.
And
Bye.
see you next time. Bye.
Bye.